Hola a todos, bienvenidos al Meetup de Mayo 2021. Yo soy la doctora Adriana Vallejo y es un gusto que nos acompañen el día de hoy para tener este Meetup en conjunto con varias organizaciones que estamos organizando. Aquí me acompaña la ingeniera Juana Martínez, que es líder de la comunidad de Women in Data Science, Power and Engineer, asimismo también el programa del Health Data Science Program, con quien hemos estado compartiendo ya en las últimas semanas algunos aprendizajes muy importantes. Y bueno, para empezar el día de hoy tenemos un evento súper interesante. Les quisiera presentar a nuestra invitada del día de hoy, que nos acompaña. Ella es la ingeniera Emily Schoof, quien es Bachelor of Science, Cell Biology and Anatomy en el California Polytechnic State University en San Luis Obispo. Ella es Data Scientist, especialista en Python, SQL Developer Consultant for UNICEF. Y bueno, tiene experiencia en múltiples organizaciones como General Assembly, Data con LA, Springboard, Healthy Together, Providence Health and Services, and California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo. Es un gusto que nos acompañe el día de hoy aquí para esta conferencia de la cual vamos a platicar y estamos muy agradecidas. Hello, Emily. Welcome to our meetup.
Hola, thank you for having me. Lo siento para mi español.
No, don't worry. It will be great to have you here. And if you can tell us, first of all, before starting our conference, how do you get into UNICEF and to this project? Could you tell us a little bit about this?
So the reason that I got into this project is I was doing a data science kind of career augmentation course through Springboard, and my mentor happened to have access to this data set. And my mentor was Ricardo, and when he learned that my interests for data science were in the humanitarian philanthropy kind of sector, he offered access to this data set for me so that I could look at adolescent maternal mortality. And at the same time, I was traveling in a couple different Spanish-speaking countries and ending in Mexico. And so it was pretty relevant for the cultures that I was experiencing as well.
That is great.
Country to us.
Yeah, definitely. That is a great journey that you have. I mean, since you started some years ago, I do from what you told us before.
It's been about 2 years, yeah. And prior to that, I was in scientific research, so I was working in the lab with pipettes.
Perfect. So with this, I will welcome you to start sharing your to screen, and we can start with the conference.
Okay. All right. Go here. Okay, so we've kind of gotten the introductions underway. My name is Emily. I'm a data scientist, originally from California, currently in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, practicing Spanish, but I do have a love for Mexico as one of the sister countries to my country. And since I am in childbearing years, adolescent or maternal mortality was of great interest to me, especially because I was surprised that maternal mortality was still such an issue given all of our modern access to healthcare and information. And when I was given access to this data set, I was curious about adolescent maternal mortality, which is specifically women and girls under the age of 19 who had a death associated with maternity. So, why is it important to analyze maternal mortality? Like, why is it such a pressing issue? And it turns out that maternal mortality has become an important measure of human and social development. Knowledge of maternal mortality levels is very important, not only for identifying the risks associated with pregnancy and childbirth, but also it says a lot about women's health indirectly and indirectly about their economic and social status. A high number of maternal deaths reflects inequalities in access to quality health care and highlights a gap between the rich and the poor. And determining the level of maternal mortality and the associated risk factors is necessary for both diagnosing issues and assessing the progress and effectiveness of current programs in existence. Hopefully I'm not talking too fast. So it's particularly in particular in Mexico, the maternal mortality situation is analyzed in Mexico as an indicator that reflects the social development of the country and as one of the Millennia Development Objectives. That was I think it was the World Health Organization came up with the Millennial Development Objectives for increasing the health of countries worldwide. And they had certain metrics, maternal mortality and lowering the maternal mortality rate, which is also called the MMR, was one of those initiatives. And evidence shows that comparing populations based on group of selected variables according to social conditions and access to healthcare statistically significantly or adds statistical significant differences relating to education and marginalized levels and access to healthcare, as I've said before. So the major complications that account for about 75% of maternal deaths are unsafe abortions, high blood pressure before pregnancy, specifically conditions like preeclampsia and eclampsia, complications from delivery, severe bleeding, mostly bleeding after childbirth, and infections usually after childbirth. So based off of a study that UNICEF did in 2019, it states that despite these complications showing up without warning, most maternal deaths can be prevented with equipped facilities and skilled medical professionals. Complications require prompt access to quality services equipped with life-saving drugs like antibiotics, and the ability to provide blood transfusions needed to perform C-sections or other surgical interventions. So in other words, most maternal mortality is incredibly preventable. And however, despite it being preventable, in 2020, Mexico registered an increase from 37.8% MMR to 46.6% MMR. So this basically means the proportion of deaths for every 100,000 estimated births. So if maternal mortality is largely preventable, if maternal mortality is largely preventable, why are we seeing an increase in maternal mortality rate in Mexico and in sister countries like the US? And then that leads me to my next question. If most maternal mortality is also preventable, what does the age distribution of these mothers look like? The younger you are when you get pregnant, the harsher it is on your body or the more complications that could arise. And that also has to do with the fact that just there's less education about the care and what needs to happen when you're pregnant and going through the pregnancy process in a healthy way when you're much younger and have less life experience. So why assess adolescent maternal mortality? The risk of maternal mortality is actually highest for adolescent girls under the age of 15, and complications in pregnancy and childbirth are higher among adolescent girls between the ages of 10 and 19 when compared to women in the age group of 20 to 24. Adolescents aged 15 to 19 are twice as likely to die in pregnancy or childbirth as those over the age of 20, and girls under the age of 15 are 5 times more likely to die. This is just indicating that how women or these girls in early pregnancy, it's just very harsh on their bodies. And as not a doctor, I can't provide you with too many more details beyond that, but I do actually think that has a lot to do with education as well. So worldwide, more than 13 million adolescent girls give birth each year, and the complications of these pregnancies and deliveries are one of the leading causes of death for these young mothers. That is a very alarming number for me, especially as somebody who's just a little bit older than that age group. And it's definitely not something that I want to see internationally for my, I don't know the best way to put that, but just like my fellow women and girls. So my project was done 2 years ago, and it was also my first data science project. So I will add that there are some, from the data science perfectionist side, there were definitely some improvements that I could make, but I think that the purpose and the direction of the project still stands as being very valid and very useful, and it kind of represents a underdeveloped and under-assessed area of medicine that is shared across all countries, specifically meaning women's health and sexual education. So my project sought to assess the factors that impact the likelihood of adolescent maternal mortality within each state in Mexico. So I made a binary variable if a country's mean age of maternal mortality was above or below the country's mean age. And then having a mean age that was above or below the norm, which is what I consider to be the mean age of maternal mortality within the data set, which was all of Mexico, was used as an indicator that those regions may have higher instances of adolescent maternal mortality, and where aid or new programs need to be developed, especially in regions with lower averages of availability to healthcare. I was given access to a wonderful data set built by I think it's a collective called the Data Science for Good. And I chose to mimic factors that were listed on the World Health Organization's webpage explaining maternal mortality, which meant looking at a woman's age, the local community size, the education level of the deceased maternal mother, and the presence or lack of presence of medical assistance. Since these were mostly numerical values, it was possible to average these values per state, which, if those familiar with analytics, when you decide to average a value, you do lose a lot of the variance, the distribution, and kind of the nitty-gritty details within the data set. So the purpose of this project was more to be like a heat sensor if there needs to be further investigation within a certain state or not. And as coming from someone not from Mexico, I was interested to see which states would come up in this analysis. Let's see. So when I was looking at the age distribution within the data set, it was only a little under 17,000 samples or rows within the data set, which I found interesting because the dates of the maternal death ranged from 1933 to 2017. So I expected there to be a lot more data. Without knowing too much about where this data came from and how it was processed prior to getting to me, I do find that to be an indicator of, are we really tracking this data as we should? And not even if we should, it's like, do we have the access to be able to track this data and then to be able to hand this data off to other data scientists like myself and other projects like Data Science for Good who can actually analyze this information. But back to the actual distribution, the age distribution went from 11 to 54. So at the very, very low end, probably the earliest you can have a period is probably around 9, so 11 to 54, which is relatively, as you can see by the distribution. The core age group was kind of between like 20 and 35, mid 30s. And so because, again, this was one of my first data science projects, when I went through, I actually noticed that there was some collinearity, which means that a couple of the features that I chose were too related to each other, and specifically meaning the state population size and the state GDP. Those are actually very highly correlated metrics. And so once I removed those from the model, I actually did decrease the accuracy of this model to 55%. But I thought it was really important to point out what top features came out as being really important. And it falls in line with what all the data is saying across the board, is that having access to medical assistance was a huge indicator, or was a huge impact in if a country would be above or below the mean age of maternal mortality, or sorry, if a state would be above or below the mean age of maternal mortality within Mexico within this data set, which again is spanning across years. And then also education. Education code stands for the level of education that the deceased woman or girl had gotten to. So some of that ranged from having almost no school at all to all the way past PhD is the term that we use in the US, but past master's, past college. And so essentially, I kind of wanted to reroute it back to what does this actually mean? So what can we actually do with models like this, even inaccurate models or even mildly accurate models, and where does this go from here? And essentially, the reigning truth and the reigning kind of theme has been educating girls has been proven to be one of the world's best ever ideas. When women are educated, all kinds of things happen in societies. And experts in maternal mortality see that the most valuable intervention for saving the lives of the poorest moms is the availability of transport to hospitals. So it's that two-factor system of increasing women's education, girls and women's education, and also increasing access to hospitals. And this is not by any means an issue just in Mexico. This is everywhere. The US is struggling with a lot of the same levels and factors. But I just had access to Mexico's data, so that's kind of why I'm focusing specifically on it. But I do also want to point out that things are getting better, they're just not great. So there is a decline. We are seeing a decline in the MMR, or the maternal mortality rate in Mexico specifically. It has been declining over time, as you can see by this trend. And that is great. That is a good thing. That means that things that are being implemented now are working, but it also just means that there's improvement. And with the impact of COVID, that impacts like the accessibility to medicine and healthcare. And, like it just kind of threw us all through a loop this year. And we're trying to in all of the different areas of the world, trying to rebalance. And even while we're still going through this pandemic. But I do really want to stress that things are getting better, and they have been getting better. They're just not great yet. We can always improve. But I know sometimes it can be very discouraging to hear about a lot of these metrics and the proportions, but it is important to keep in mind that things that have been happening are actually being impactful. We just can see areas of improvement, and that's kind of what these models, when they're put together by a team and they're like put together in a little bit more of an accurate way, like they have a really important use case where they can just kind of help pick up the outliers, because, like we want to lower this very preventable reason for mortality in women and girls as much as possible, because there are so many other factors that we can't control. So it's important to focus on what we can. And so on that same note, the US, Mexico, and a lot of other regions within the world, we are technically considered at a low maternal mortality ratio because it is below 100. Again, Mexico went up from like 37 to like 46. And so the increase is still not ideal. it's not ideal, but at the same time, it is important to keep in perspective that things are getting better and these improvements are working in implementations. And you can see that by like the lower maternal mortality ratio kind of across the board, except for, other countries that have different access to, I guess, again, education, access to healthcare. But yeah, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to put everything in context of things are great but they can get better. They can get much better. And so that's kind of where these models can kind of help assist what doctors and medical professionals and government officials are already kind of strategizing when it comes to implementing these new methods of increasing the health and livelihood of their citizens, essentially, and their patients. And then I am a huge fan of Melinda Gates, and I find her last remark to be like a really great word to end on. In her quote, she says, "The world is finally waking up to the fact that none of us can move forward when half of us are held back. The data is clear. Empowered women transform societies." And this kind of leads on to the fact of, we're talking about maternal mortality. Women are the only sex that can experience maternal mortality. It is a women-specific condition. And so it's something that women have more of a perception on. We have mothers, we have pregnancies ourselves, we have friends, we have just the body shape and the organs that allow us to be able to reproduce. And that's such a magical thing. And so as we educate women more, women will be able to provide these like really amazing and already have been providing these amazing adjustments that allow us to improve and reduce consequences like maternal mortality when there are holes in the system. And so on that note, that's kind of the end of my presentation. I will make sure that the resources are available to you. These are the resources I used. Some are in Spanish, and I provided those links. Some are in English, but I highly recommend reading this book called Factfulness. It goes over a lot of global metrics that are happening all around the world, the different levels of economies, international, and again, I've been saying this over and over again, but women being educated and collectively being educated to the same degree, if not more so, than their boy and male counterparts are elevating countries by an entire economic level. And it's quite fascinating and really encouraging and spectacular to be able to see. But I will check now to see if there are any questions. I apologize if my English was too fast. I'm very passionate about the education and empowerment of women and girls, so I do tend to speak a little quickly when I'm talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily. It was great information. I think this is so important what you're sharing with us, because normally we don't have a lot of information. I'm going to translate. Muchas gracias, Emily, por esta conferencia. Creo que es muy importante porque muchas veces no tenemos acceso a esta información, a veces en nuestro país. And so I'll go back and forth. Iré de un idioma al otro. With this, we will take place to the Q&A. Vamos a pasar a las preguntas y respuestas. First, I'm going to put you a comment from Dr. Georgina Garcia. Felicidades. Congratulations for the initiative to take this subject. This is very important. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and perspective. It's very important. Then we have from Silvia Logia, we have an excellent initiative. Congrats. From Stella Perez, you already showed the information, but hello, which are the data sets that you use? You already showed them.
And Can you translate this for me?
Yeah.
I will provide the resources, and I'll also provide the link to the data, and the webpage of Data Science for Good is mentioned in my resources section.
Sí, Emily dice que va a darnos la información que mostró ahorita en la pantalla, así como los links y la página web donde pueden revisar toda la investigación que ella ha realizado hasta el momento. Okay, perfect. Juana, do you have any other question for Emily?
¿Puedes traducir, Adriana?
Sí.
Gracias. Antes que nada, muchas felicidades, Emily. Gracias por compartirnos.
Thanks for sharing with us.
Sí, disculpa que te hable en español, pero mi inglés no es muy bueno para formular toda la pregunta que quiero.
Don't worry.
Estoy practicando español, pero I am very nervous. I am a nervous Spanish speaker, and it's functional. I can order in a cafe, and I can be cordial, but it's no for data.
No, don't worry. No te preocupes.
Lo que yo quisiera saber es si dentro de tu análisis, además de los factores que ya tienes identificados, has logrado ver algunas otras correlaciones, además del estatus social o los accesos a servicios de salud, porque, bueno, hay a veces situaciones que no podemos ver, ¿no? Sobre todo en estos casos como presión familiar o presión por parte incluso de amigos cercanos. Entonces, quisiera saber si viste alguna correlación interesante con esos factores en tu análisis.
So I'm going to translate. Juana asked if, besides the factors that you already show us, you found something else, because sometimes we have lack of access to clinical or healthcare, also to the pressure from the family or friends or society, or some other correlationship.
So I actually used to work in scientific research, and I would consent to patients for research. I'll do one sentence at a time for you. I'll do one sentence so you can translate.
Sorry. Antes trabajaba en investigación y consentía a los pacientes para conocer su información.
So I'm familiar with the realistic tension that happens when you ask patients for additional information that allows you to use it in this kind of research context.
Sí, y estoy consciente que a veces se vuelve un poco complicado o incómodo para la gente que te pueda compartir más información de la que ya vimos en este contexto.
Es que a futuras fechas estamos viendo sacar un proyecto donde creo que tu investigación puede complementar tu investigación debido a que estamos tratando de ver la relación del abandono de los estudios por parte de niñas y jovencitas y que obviamente esto va directamente relacionado a embarazos a temprana edad y luego a la complicación de reintegrarse a la vida laboral. Sí. Después de un embarazo, ya sea que llegase a término o no.
Okay, Juana says that we're thinking in doing future research when we could correlate the education level. I mean, when they drop out from school, or so that they can go back to, for example, to work in a certain place. So, what do you think about this?
Oh, I think that would be so useful. Coming from both working, and I'm not a doctor, but I worked in research and in a hospital, and I also have done analytics, and there is such a beautiful overlap and collaboration that can happen there, given the right perspectives. And it sounds like you have that in this situation. And so that I'm sure you guys will be able to figure out so many important things.
Creo que es maravilloso porque poder, yo he estado en el hospital trabajando y además también en ciencia de datos y bueno, poder encontrar estas correlaciones realmente ayuda mucho a hacer un análisis mucho más profundo y conocer más a profundidad el tema en general.
Sí, bueno,
sorry, go ahead, Juana.
From my side, thank you for being here, Emily. Muchas gracias por tu presentación. Muchas gracias por habernos acompañado.
Yeah.
Y espero que pronto tengamos nuestras sesiones que hemos platicado, ¿no?
Yeah. She says that thanks for being here, and also hope that in a near future, we can have more sessions with you to work in this project. I have a question.
I would love to.
Me encantaría. Temis Joanna says, let me put it. What extra information you consider there is necessary? And that it is not, we don't have it yet. I mean, they haven't developed the information. Mainly because I'm interested in doing research in maternal mortality and COVID in Mexico.
So I do want to preface, I'm by no means an expert. I am a scientist who is very personally invested in this and also personally curious. And so while I might not be able to answer that question entirely, I do know that combining two kind of things together is important, but there's a lot of, just be careful that your variables are chosen very, so they don't conflict, if that makes sense. Yeah. And they, there's not a lot of mud in the data, if that makes sense, because you want to see, in a different way, construct your question very specifically and then pick data very specifically for that question, because if we add in a lot of features in the data or columns or attributes, we can kind of see a trend in anything at the end of the day. And so in order to specifically answer a question, it's a very specific question followed by a very specific selection of data to answer and predict that question.
Definitely. Creo que voy a tratar de regresar todo. Creo que es muy importante, no me considero experta en el tema, pero lo que sí te podría comentar es que hicieras una pregunta muy específica, con data muy específica, para que no le agregues como mucho lodo, por así decirlo, mucho ruido.
Mucho ruido.
A la pregunta, y que puedas realmente obtener una respuesta que sea lo más certera posible. Porque si no, con tantas variables, tantas columnas, te podría dar, como bien decíamos, ruido y podría complicar pues la situación. Emily, I would want to go back to this slide where you share the causes, the main causes of maternal mortality in adolescents in Mexico that you found with this with this. Yeah, don't worry. Take your time.
Let's do this. Okay. I shared my screen before I shared my screen.
Perfect. And this is big because I want to go back to a topic. Yeah. Where you find the main causes of maternal mortality in adolescents.
Yeah. In adolescents?
Yeah, well, the one that you found out.
Here.
Perfect.
Oops.
Don't worry, you don't want to go.
Okay.
So, we found, I mean, you found out these important things, the main risk that they have in this age, that is really like when they are, I mean, a person is really starting their lives to get to be like a little bit independent, to get decisions as an individual person or as a couple, and they are surrounded by family, friends. So this is a very delicate age. I'm going to translate in Spanish.
Sí.
Tú encontraste puntos muy importantes en una etapa que es muy delicada y muy importante, porque es cuando una persona va empezando a tomar decisiones en lo individual, como independiente, ¿no? O en pareja o alrededor de la familia. Entonces, estos puntos que encontramos en el, ¿cómo se llama? En esta información, you can go to the next slide where the main causes are. I do believe that there were like 4 or 5 causes that you found. Nos va a mostrar la diapositiva donde hay las causas. Thank you. The main causes for maternal mortality are like abortions, dangerous abortion, gestational hypertension, which is clinically called preeclampsia or eclampsia. Sorry, I'm going to say that in Spanish. In English, infections through postpartum, complications also during birth, and one of the main causes by much in every developing country is a big hemorrhage, and mainly because the uterus don't contract after giving birth. So normally, for you to know, 30 minutes after a woman has a baby, the uterus should contract, and so that you can avoid having a hemorrhage like this. And when you don't have, I mean, and there are a lot of factors that can be implicated here. We were talking 2 days ago about this, and I think that is one of the most dangerous problem. Hace un par de días estábamos hablando acerca de estas causas, principalmente de los abortos peligrosos, que en una etapa como la de los adolescentes, es realmente algo que se da mucho por presión en la sociedad, por mala educación, y principalmente por falta de acceso a una forma segura. Y no quiero que me malinterpreten. En realidad la causa principal, el motivo principal debería ser prevenir que hubiera un embarazo a una edad tan temprana, ¿no? Pero aquí en la situación de que ya hubo un embarazo, muchas personas tienen un acceso a un poco acceso a lugares seguros para poder tener una atención segura. Well, we were talking 2 days ago that they didn't have access to healthcare facilities which are safe to get a proper abortion, even though what we intend is that they should prevent the pregnancy in this early age.
Right, like abortion is a very and I think it's translating for me. Abortion is a very controversial topic, and so while it's like really important to talk about, though, because it is again one of these leading causes of maternal mortality, when it's done incorrectly or an at-home abortion, they can be very dangerous. And so the place where pro-life and pro-abortion teams can really get on the same page is the prevention. It's like, well, how do we prevent women from having to get to the point where they need an abortion? And that's like with safe sex practices, sexual health, education of women. And I talk about the education of girls specifically because while sex is kind of a normal part of life, if you're a girl and you're 15 and you don't know really what else you could do in life, like maybe you see things in your community or like maybe online, but you haven't, I mean, maybe you just like weren't educated to the point where your imagination was instigated and you can think of all these things to do. I think it's much easier, especially as somebody who was not 15 too long ago, to be like in love with whoever you're dating at that time. And that might be a long-term partner, but also being in the mindset where you're okay having a kid at 15. And I think that's kind of what goes hand in hand with educating women, because it's like, especially girls, because that gives girls a sense of imagination, a sense of the things that they can accomplish and do, and go out in the world and succeed at. And so I think that being a mother is a prize, and that should be something prized and special in the life of whatever that ends up being in each individual woman's life. But I think that, and specifically in the cases of adolescent women or adolescent girls becoming pregnant, I wonder if it's actually due to a lack of education and a lack of wonder of what they can accomplish, because I think that's also something that's really missing from education of girls is, I mean, not across the board, but, you know, it isn't uncommon for girls to not be given the ability or the space in their like communities or their school or what have you to be able to dream big and think of all the things that they can accomplish. And I think that even instigating that in schools more back home, especially like here, I'm sure we're sister countries, it can't be that different. Yeah, just like instigating that sense of wonder and excitement in girls and all that they can accomplish. I think that that will also really impact the adolescent maternal mortality, MMR, and decrease it in like a really beautiful way.
Definitely, education is power. Definitivamente la educación da poder a las personas. And also, y también in other way, pregnancy, hypertension, infections, and complications during postpartum, they can be preventable if these girls that choose to have a baby to term, they have since the beginning these prenatal checks with their OB-GYN. También es importante todas estas enfermedades como lo que es la hipertensión gestacional, las infecciones y posibles complicaciones durante el parto se pueden prevenir si estas niñas, estas adolescentes que deciden sí tener su embarazo hasta término, tienen una atención temprana con su ginecólogo o con su médico en la zona en la que estén, y se decide si es la mejor opción tener un parto o en caso de que no fuese la mejor opción tener una cesárea. And if not, they can decide if the best way to have this baby will be through a natural birth or if not a C-section, because the conditions are not the best, the better option for this girl.
Yeah. Yeah, and that kind of leads me to, and this is something that my personal gynecologist had told me. She actually advocates for prenatal vitamins in all women or girls from like the age of like 15 to like 25, 30. Because it does provide you with the supplements that you need and you kind of lose through your just regular cycles. And then if you happen to become pregnant during that time, your body's kind of prepared a little bit, and it has like the nutrients and kind of like, or not the nutrients, but you know what I'm saying? It has like the initial kind of nutrition and availability of resources to kind of develop like a baby in a really healthy way. And that doesn't mean that you can't develop a baby healthily without these supplements and without these interventions, but that's kind of why we're dealing with maternal mortality at such a high rate when it's so preventable, is like without these interventions, especially in the young girls.
definitely that is really, really important. So going back, I'm going to hide this your screen.
Okay.
So going back to data, which is really important. You had a hard time finding out the most recent and accurate data. I mean, you didn't have much information. Le estoy comentando a Emily, tú tuviste un poco de dificultad encontrando buenas bases de datos que fueran precisas y vamos, que estuvieran actualizadas al día de hoy o, bueno, recientemente.
And
¿qué?
in honesty, that could be a reflection of me just not being in the industry. So I'm not working in it full time. It was a side project. But also it does reflect on the side of medical information specifically is worth a lot of money. And so it's highly protected, and it's also very unsafe for people if personal health information gets leaked. And so I'm just not personally familiar with the correct channels of being able to grab this data effectively. I think that you probably could try like World Health Organization, and you probably could like bounce around to different links and kind of see like where all these information is found. I know that GDELT is a free database that is event type data, and you can extract data and you can specifically query for things like maternal mortality, but that is also based off of like news articles and stuff. And so I'm not familiar myself with the most optimal way to extract this data, but I'm not necessarily convinced it's not out there. It's just I myself didn't know.
Yeah. Bueno, desde su punto de vista, dice, yo no estoy todo el tiempo en esta industria, yo lo trabajo como un proyecto por aparte, pero sí creo que, por un lado, bueno, eso es por un lado, pero por el otro lado, si estás interesado o interesada en encontrar esta información, puedes ir a solicitarlo en ciertas fuentes como la Organización Mundial de la Salud, como GIRO, you said GIRO, right?
It's GDELT.
Sorry.
GDELT. So GDELT.
Oh, GDLT, yeah, sorry. Y otras fuentes donde puedas, vamos, hacer la solicitud de esta información. También es algo que dice que pues no es que podría desconocer un poco porque esta información es información sensible y que pues evidentemente no está al alcance de todos porque se puede filtrar información sensible y que pueda poner en riesgo a las personas, por lo que es importante seguir todos los protocolos para hacer la solicitud apropiada y además de eso el uso adecuado de esta información, vamos como a anonimizar los datos o evitar que cierta información privada de las personas se lance. In this way, I think yes, you were saying so much important points. We were also talking about the fact that there is not a centralized way that you can find information, and sometimes some information is public, but not all. For example, we were talking some days ago about public sector information that is it tends to be more public, but not in the private sector, and this could be in a OB-GYN, like a private consultation office. It could be in a hospital, it could be in a clinic, it could be in other places. Hablamos hace un par de días de la relevancia que no encontramos mucha información como centralizada o en algún lugar donde pueda facilitar, porque muchas veces la información del sector público a veces es más sencillo encontrarlo y con sus asegúnes es un poco más sencillo encontrarlo. Sin embargo, por ejemplo, del sector privado, que pudiera ser en consultorios, pudiera ser en clínicas, pudiera ser en hospitales, es más difícil encontrar esta información. Y esto, a su vez, perpetúa el problema porque no encontramos, por ejemplo, las zonas del país en donde más pudiera existir maternidad, una alta tasa de una mortalidad materna. O, por ejemplo, ciertas prácticas, etcétera, ciertas tendencias, porque esta información no está tan a la mano para personas como Emily, que han dedicado parte de su tiempo para hacer este tipo de investigaciones. That the information, due to the fact that the information that is not that available, we tend to continue with some practices through the years, because we cannot see things as where there's more rate of maternal mortality or so, other things that put in risk as the adolescents in this matter. What do you think about this? ¿Qué piensas de esto?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a radical view. I don't know why it's a radical view, but just a better access to healthcare information that's been de-identified and to the same extent that this data was, which doesn't have any real specifications about the data or about the patients. I don't really, I have a feeling it's coming in the next couple of years. This is a problem that's pretty widespread in like the medical research facility or industry, just because like, I mean, I worked in research and data was highly protected because that's how you get funding. That's how you move to a different institution. It's how you get clout. It's how you get papers published. It's the kind of like, it's a reflection of the system in and of itself being pretty cutthroat in the research side and the data, like where the data is actually being acquired. And I think that bigger companies are starting, like obviously this is a known problem, so bigger companies who are a little bit more impactful and have bigger guns, I guess, in the healthcare system, especially in the US, they're starting to be able to get access to that and like create these models that are really effective. And that's a really great start. But at the end of the day, data should be a little bit more available. And so I don't really know what the solution to that would look like, but having it available to researchers and people who are working at different medical institutions would be really impactful, not just keeping the data with people who have enough money and power to be able to process the data, if that makes sense. Oh, you're muted.
Emily dice que, bueno, pues esto sí es, digo, algo que en su forma personal de verlo es que, bueno, es algo que en los últimos años le ha pasado, no solamente en este tema, en otros temas también, que muchas de las veces la información estaba reservada para ciertas organizaciones, porque son las organizaciones que publican, que hacen investigación, etcétera, pero poco a poco la investigación, la data está siendo un poco más accesible gracias a organizaciones que tienen como armas más poderosas, por así decirlo, para hacer, una forma de extraer información de forma más rápida y accesible y que se pueda utilizar de mejor forma, porque al final del día el poder tener acceso a esta información puede brindar mayores opciones a la investigación y que, bueno, en general podamos conocer más acerca de este u otros temas. I think I said it right. I'm not sure if I said it. I skipped something, or you're in mute.
From the Espanol that I know, it sounded about right.
Perfect. Juana, I don't know if you have any other questions to Emily. ¿Tienes otra pregunta para Emily, Juana? Estás en mute.
Que no, por mi parte no. Realmente me parece un tema muy interesante. Creo que remarca mucho. Bueno, espero que le traduzcas esto a Emily. Y nuevamente le pido una disculpa por decirlo en español. Pero creo que es importante. Creo que esto remarca mucho la necesidad precisamente de tener la información disponible a ciertos niveles y de manera anonimizada para, pues, precisamente para que proyectos como este puedan crecer y dar información valiosa a la sociedad para que se puedan llegar a las personas correctas para aplicar las políticas correctas. Al final de esto es una cuestión no nada más de mostrar una estadística, mostrar un dato, sino de salvar vidas y dar calidad de vida también.
Okay.
Así que le agradezco mucho su interés en este tema.
Hannah, Juana is saying to you, thank you. It was really important. With this, she's doing like some like she's saying. This is so important because this data just not is not just like any other number. Is also saving lives and giving quality to make better life to these girls, and this is so important that the information is available to to the right person so that they can analyze and take the right decisions to make to change policies, for example, politics. In other countries or in our country, and if we have this information available and with the correct security procedures that they have to have this information, well, we can take better decisions with this.
Yeah, I think the medical industry internationally is going through a really big change. And what we're talking about right now is part of that change. And we have a globalized economy. And the COVID situation and the pandemic really showed us that we actually have a globalized medical kind of community as well. And I think scientists have kind of known that for ever. I mean, as long as you know how viruses are spread, you've known that, but like now it's like really being seen on a global scale and on a global economic scale. And so I think that the research and investment into medical information and initiatives like this is going to increase tenfold kind of over the next couple of years as we understand that we're all kind of interconnected.
Emily comenta que dice, bueno, creo que con la situación de la pandemia nos hemos dado cuenta que tenemos un mundo global, una medicina global. Digo que esto es algo que ella y los epidemiólogos se han dado cuenta hace muchos años, porque pues un virus se puede esparcir en cualquier lugar del mundo, pero creo que se ha visualizado, se ha llevado que todo el mundo lo pueda ver. Y al final del día resaltar puntos como este, que tenemos que tener disponibilidad de los datos, poder conocer más acerca de las situaciones de salud que vivimos como esta, que si compartimos más la información, si la hacemos más accesible, pues puede ayudar a más personas a que tengan una mejor salud y que tengan mejor acceso a muchas situaciones. That will be it. That is correct, Emily?
I didn't hear anything about COVID or pandemic, but I think you kind of got everything.
Yeah, I said it before, like the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
It was like first. It was a first.
Oh, yeah, no, I sometimes forget the flipping of Espanol and English. It's like flipped.
Don't worry. Well, thank you very much, Emily, for this. I just want to end up giving you some announcements for our next events and activities. Let me share my screen. Well, I will say this in Spanish. Vamos a dar algunos avisos de siguientes actividades que tenemos. El próximo 25 de mayo, de parte de Hacking Health Monterrey, vamos a tener este evento, el Meet and Greet de Healthcare Ecosystems in UK, donde vamos a poder conocer algunos fondos de inversión que trabajan con startups en el Reino Unido y el caso particular de dos emprendimientos mexicanos que están trabajando allá en Reino Unido. Este evento está organizado por la Embajada Británica en México, por Pragmatech, por Hacking Health Monterrey y Ciudad de México. También de parte de Health ADS, los invitamos a que se registren en el newsletter mensual para que reciban más noticias acerca de temas de salud digital, de dispositivos médicos, de todo el tema alrededor de health tech, de ciencia de datos, etcétera. Vienen temas muy, muy importantes, eventos, boletines, libros, podcasts, webinars, etcétera, que pueden recibir en su correo. Y también invitarlos a que nos sigan en nuestras redes sociales, @WITSCommunity, en @HH Monterrey, en las diferentes redes sociales, @HealthIDS y Health Data Science Program o HDS Program para que puedan conocer más información de eventos como el del día de hoy que les podrían ser de su interés. Y bueno, pues Emily, muchísimas gracias nuevamente. Thank you, Emily, for being here. And with this,
thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Juana, anything else? ¿Algo más, Juana? Estás en mute.
Sorry. No, por mí es todo. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Esperemos te animes para un siguiente evento.
Hope that you can be here with us in a next event.
Y también a participar en la comunidad. Sí, incluso, como te dije, en próximos meses queremos sacar esta iniciativa para empezar a ver esas correlaciones de por qué las niñas y jovencitas abandonan las carreras de tecnología y esto cómo repercute en algunos casos como embarazos tempranos. Te mantendré informada y cuando gustes participar, ya sea con este otro proyecto, con lo que tú quieras, estamos totalmente abiertos.
And yes, I will keep you in touch with you to talk about a project that we want to do to get to know why teenagers, women teenagers, drop out from STEM careers and some other variables such as an adolescent pregnancy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I would love to do that.
Thank you.
That is a big problem, actually. It's almost like you have to have a really thick skin to be in STEM. And it's less of a problem than it was before, but that doesn't mean it's not a problem. And I don't have a very thick skin myself, so it's been a journey. So I would love to look at the analytics behind that. Absolutely.
Sí. Bueno, solo quiero hacer una aclaración. Digo, no es que tomemos como factor que precisamente dejan carreras de tecnología, sino que dejan su educación en general, ¿no?
They just don't leave STEM careers, but education at all. Like,
that's a big one too. Absolutely.
Perfect. Sí, Emily decía que le encantaría, porque sí, tienes que, bueno, primero hablando de las carreras STEM, tienes que tener como una piel dura, ¿no? Pues para dedicarte a esta área, pero sí le encantaría ver las variables. Y bueno, Juana, como ven, hizo la aclaración de en general la educación, y dice, sí, me encantaría también ver en general de la educación, porque es un tema muy importante y que sigue pasando en muchos lugares. Bueno, pues con esto nos despedimos. Agradecemos mucho a todos ustedes por estar el día de hoy y bueno, pues nos estamos viendo en siguientes eventos. Que tengan un buen día. Adiós.